You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in a very special guest, Lisa Bloom, founder and owner of the Bloom firm, fighter for the underdog, and champion of women's rights. How are you?
Well, that's very nice. Hi, Benny. I'm just great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. You have offices in LA and New York City. Where are you right now? You're in LA?
I'm in Los Angeles. Yes.
Yeah. How are things going out there, COVID wise?
I just got my booster shot yesterday, so I have an arm that I can only raise a little bit. But we're cautious and we're careful, and I think we're doing okay.
Good.
Thanks for asking. Where are you?
So I'm in Massachusetts, Central Mass, about 45 minutes from Boston.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Portland, Maine, but that's another story. So, awesome. Well, we're really excited to have you. I want to just talk about your story. Lawyer Stories started in 2017 on Instagram. We founded our podcast last year before the pandemic, and we're up to 60 or 70 episodes. It's been a lot of fun, and we're glad to have you. So, tell us, real quick, born and raised. Tell us about that. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Philadelphia, and I was raised in Los Angeles and graduated high school in Los Angeles, went to college here at UCLA, then went east to Yale Law School. And then I practiced law in New York for many years, lived in New York for many years. My adult life has been back and forth, New York and LA. Now I'm in LA.
Right.
So for a while.
So we're definitely going to go through all of that sort of bit by bit, because I have a lot of questions. So your mom, Gloria Allred. What was it like growing up with her as an attorney? Actually, tell us about the story, which I'm a softball fan. I played some softball. I think I read something where they tried to exclude women softball players. And you actually, that was your first sort of go at equality.
Yeah, my first kind of women's right. Well, I don't know if that was the first, but my mom, Gloria Allred, a very well-known feminist attorney, and it was always an inspiration to have her as a mom, because she didn't care about what I was wearing or how I did my hair. She cared about what was in my brain, what I was thinking. Was I reading books that challenged me? Was I able to debate? And so when I was in the 6th grade, they had a faculty student softball game. Well, it turned out that it was faculty male student softball game. It was only boys were allowed to do that, because back in those days, girls were not allowed to do most of the things that were fun. So we were excluded. Now, I was not a softball player. I was kind of afraid of balls being thrown near my head. I was a very bookish child, but nevertheless, I still thought it was wrong. And I had girlfriends who wanted to play. So we organized a protest. My mom encouraged this and made signs. We were 11 years old, and we picketed the school and said it was sexist and girls should be allowed to play in the faculty student softball game. And we won. And they said, you're right, and girls can play. And so some of my athletic friends played, and it was a great victory at teaching me that, wow, you can actually just speak out and have a protest, and you can make change. So it was really exhilarating.
And you can get things done. That's right.
Yeah.
So you went to UCLA because you were out west, but what brought you out to Yale? So I actually lived in New Haven for 4 or 5 years, and I loved it. Socially, it was great. It was a great time. I lived right downtown, and so I kind of know that area. So how did you get out east? What made you come out east?
Well, I was on the debate team in college at UCLA, and we won the national championship after a great deal of work, and I was the top speaker. So I basically won all the debate accolades and trophies. And so when I applied to law school, I applied to all the best law schools, and Yale at the time was, and still is, I think, the #1 law school in the country. So I couldn't say no to that.
Sure.
So I went out there of course, I was freezing because I was the LA girl and I didn't understand like the concept of for 6 months, it's really cold.
Yeah.
So I had to learn about that. But I really did love my years at Yale. Just before this interview we're doing, I just didn't have my 35th law school reunion. And, you know, all the people who were such bright, you know, amazing, creative, accomplished young people are now bright, amazing, accomplished older people.
Yep.
And it just reminded me of how honored I was to even be in that group.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So like, what was your law school experience like? Like, was there anything that you found challenging or that you particularly enjoyed while you were there?
Yeah, well, I found a lot of it challenging because, you know, these are like all the smartest people from all over the country.
Sure, yeah.
And who was I? Like a girl from LA who went to a big public college, and there are people there who were Rhodes Scholars and, you know, PhDs. And so it was definitely intimidating. My first year, there was a strike by female clerical and technical workers. It was a sex discrimination issue. They felt that they were getting paid less than men in comparable jobs. And so I refused to cross the picket line as a women's rights issue. And so that meant I didn't go to classes. And we tried to force the professors to have the classes off campus, which some of them did. It meant I couldn't try out for Law Journal, which I really wanted to do, but I was always raised, you don't cross a picket line. And that's especially true when it's a women's rights issue. So that was my first year.
Wow. Okay.
But I loved the classes. I loved the students. It was a very exciting time. It was a wonderful time, and it has a very special place in my heart. Yale Law.
Sure. That's awesome. So like, what advice would you give for like a 1L law student, somebody who's a first year law student today?
Buckle down, read everything that's assigned, read the extra credit. One of the things I noticed among my classmates was there were no excuses. There was no, like when I went to UCLA, there were a lot of people who kind of blew off the assignments. That didn't happen at Yale. These were all the people who were like number one in their class from wherever. They read everything that was assigned, often on the first or second day, even if it wasn't required for another 2 weeks. And then they went off on their own to the library and did their own independent research just because they were so fascinated by the topic, right?
Yeah.
And I was like blown away by these people.
Yeah.
So, you know, throw yourself into it, no excuses, do the absolute best that you can. Hang out with other smart people who also are really buckling down and really throwing themselves into it.
I think that's so important to find people who are like really into learning, because when you get to law school, it's like no joke anymore. You know, you really have to buckle down and you have to really study and do well. I mean, I know it sounds kind of obvious, but I think like, you know, it happens where people kind of sometimes treat it as an extension of undergrad. It's just not going to work. So one thing I was pretty interested in was there was like a landmark constitutional law case of Bowers v. Hardwick in 1986 that you, I think, were, I don't want to say involved in, but you sort of picketed. Like, how would you say you? That was the statute that criminalized homosexual sodomy, and you know, you felt that was wrong, and it made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. So what was your involvement in that?
I was involved in a tiny little baby law student way. And that is that my second summer, I worked at Lambda Legal Defense, which is an LGBT rights organization. And we went down to Louisiana and we fought this case. At that point, it was at the Court of Appeals level. And this was, as you said correctly, this was a case that challenged the constitutionality of a law that criminalized consensual gay sex. Police had looked through the window into somebody's home, saw him having sex with another man consensually in the privacy of his own home, and he was arrested. And so we were challenging the constitutionality of that law. And that went up in the Court of Appeals. And then, you know, of course, I went back for my third year of law school, graduated law school. That summer, as I was studying for the bar, the Supreme Court came down with Bowers v. Hardwick and said, yes, you can constitutionally criminalize gay sex. I was really upset about this decision. I was in New York at that time. We sat down on the streets and had protests, and the police came at us with riot gear. And I thought, you know what? I don't even want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be part of the system that would be so is horrible. And I really had a big soul searching time. I eventually did sit for the bar, passed the bar, did become a lawyer. I decided, you know, to be a lawyer and try to fight this. In 2003, Lawrence v. Kansas, I think it was, ultimately reversed Bowers v. Hardwick. And of course, now you can't do that. You can't criminalize gay sex. But at the time, it was really devastating.
Right. And, I think that says a lot about you. Like, you start off with the softball game. I know that's that's small, but then you work your way up and you're sort of advocating for Bowers v. Hardwick and like the court to not uphold those restrictions. So in the statute, so you sort of have a theme, right? You have a theme and you're like working up to like where you're going to go. And I think like that's a really important and significant part of your story. So like, tell us about your first job at a law school.
My first job, I really wanted to do civil rights work, like at the ACLU, for example. And then it turned out the ACLU had like one job and you had to have 10 years experience. So I was not eligible.
Yeah.
And I
kind of it's always like that. It's not, law students look at jobs and they're like, I don't have 5 to 8 years experience. Like, how do I get this? So, okay.
Of course, now you could start your own law firm, which I would circle back to. But at the time, that never dawned on me. So I went to a small litigation firm in New York, and I negotiated with them that I would be able to do 25% of my work would be civil rights work, and the other 75% I would do the business law cases they assigned to me. So I did that for a little while. I enjoyed it. I then ended up going as like a second or third year baby lawyer. I went to a larger firm, Robinson Silverman, which is now Bryan Cade. Now it's a giant firm. And I had the same kind of deal. I was doing business litigation, real estate litigation, but a small part of the work, I was doing civil rights cases. And then shortly after that, I went to work at my mom's firm, Allred, Marco, and Goldberg. And I got to full-time do this kind of work.
All the way, you went back to California from New York. So
so I came back to California. This is my zigzagging adult life between New York and California. So I came back to California, I think it was 1991. My mom always wanted me to work with her. I felt that I really wanted to establish myself first. My mom is a big name. I didn't want to be just her daughter, living in her shadow. And so I wanted to establish myself in New York at these other firms, which I think I did. They offered me early partnership. Everything went really well. And then one day I thought, why am I only doing what I really want to do 25% of the time? I could be doing it 100%. And that would be working at my mom's firm. So I said, okay, I'll come back to California. I'll work with you. We'll do these civil rights cases.
And she told you, she was like, you could do civil rights like the whole time.
Well, yeah, because that's what her firm does. So that's all that they do is they represent women.
I think that's incredible because I think, when you go to law school, there's people who are interested in like constitutional law, the whole Bowers v. Hardwick thing that I'd say you were involved in it. And then there's like other, like cases, civil rights. And so that's a really good opportunity. So why not go work with your mother and get some experience and take on these amazing cases? And they need an advocate like you, so that's,
what, and it turned out to be great. And I was there for about 9 years. And, my mom and I are both strong-willed people and we worked together beautifully. And there were, of course, a lot of other attorneys in the firm. I learned a lot, which I now apply in my own firm. And it was just a great experience. We did one of the first cases in the country on behalf of a woman with repressed memories of child sexual abuse. We tried the case. I was second chair at that trial. We won a great court victory. And then I started doing a lot of child sexual abuse cases.
Okay, very important to have you as an advocate. And you had your own show on Court TV. So like back in 2001, I used to be like a big fan. I have like this old school, I don't know where I got a Court TV t-shirt. I don't know if I lost it. It's like, I loved it. I don't know. So this is kind of like, I've kind of thought of this question, like it's really awesome that you had a show for 8 years on Court TV starting in 2001. You stand up for people like women, people of color, LGBTQ, rights of juvenile and the mentally ill. So important that they have like competent representation. So like, in your opinion, like what group still struggles the most for respect, and like what group has made the most progress, would you say?
Well, I think that African Americans still struggle the most, and that's because there are so many shootings of unarmed African Americans by police. And I do a lot of those cases. I do police misconduct cases. There's nothing worse than death, right? I mean, we can be discriminated against, we can be harassed. That's bad. And I do a lot of those cases, but having your life taken, I think is worst of all. And that still happens disproportionately. And a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of African Americans are shot and killed by police every year in this country. Right. So I think that's the worst. I think the best progress in my lifetime would be LGBT folks.
Okay.
Going from, as we talked about, where you could actually be thrown in jail for having consensual gay sex in your own home in my lifetime, to gay marriage. That's a huge move forward. I mean, it was never fast enough for me, but in the scope of the civil rights history, compared to other groups, it was pretty fast. And that's great. And that was huge progress. And of course, a lot more still remains to be done.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great answer. So like you noted, and I've read that you yourself were sexually harassed by a high-ranking person at a network that you work for. You never named him, right? And I think that's really significant. Have you named him or no? You never named him.
I have not.
You have not yet named him. Because, and one thing I really like is like, you're a believer in second chances and apologies and redemption.
That's right.
So you are, and I think that's really significant. I really want to point that out because, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I want to just say that I think that that's sort of why in the beginning you decided to represent Harvey Weinstein, right?
Well, it's true.
Because you were a believer, like you thought you could get him in a room, talk to him, and then, like sort of second chance, and you didn't know that there were actual allegations. Is that accurate?
Right. So yes, I have given a lot of thought in my life to apologies. And in the case of the executive who sexually harassed me, shoved me up against a door, stuck his tongue down my throat. I mean, it was disgusting. Yeah. But I reported him, and he apologized to me. Right. And he said to me, how do I know that you're not going to claim that anything bad that happens to you at work is retaliation? And I said, because I don't lie. So that's not going to happen. And how do I know that you're not going to retaliate against me? And so, I kind of threw it back at him. Anyway, right. After a couple of awkward weeks, he did straighten up his act. We had a good working relationship and went on for years to have a good working relationship. Right. Yeah. Now, I believe that I had the power to forgive him. This didn't happen to somebody else. It happened to me. Right. And I chose to forgive him because he genuinely apologized and he cleaned up his act. And I thought that was important. And I have made mistakes. I've never made that particular mistake, but I've made other mistakes. Yeah. I think we all need to have the opportunity to do better. When it came to Harvey Weinstein, and I mean, this is in the record of the public statement he gave that I at the time, I thought we were talking about verbal misconduct. There was no woman who had gone on the record accusing him of sexual assault. I thought we were talking about him saying things in the workplace that were inappropriate, offensive, and he was willing to apologize for that. And I was willing to help him with that. Well, of course, it ended up being 1,000 times worse than that. Right. And he ended up being, and this is the first woman who came out with a sexual assault allegation. I said, that's it, I'm out. This is a whole different thing than I thought I was signed up for. Right. I'm out. I resigned, and I'm mortified that I was ever associated with that monster. But, we as lawyers, we're not mind readers. We do our investigation. We talk to people. We believe people. So many people, from Hillary Clinton to Gloria Steinem were hanging out with Harvey Weinstein at the time that I was. And I thought, here's a guy who makes Holocaust movies. Here's a guy who makes LGBT movies. Here's a guy who wants to change. I mean, I couldn't have been more wrong, but that's what I thought at the time. For sure.
But I think you sort of, your intent was to handle it like you did when you had your own personal situation. And that was sort of to see if, there was like to try to get him in a room, talk to him, see if he could change. And then you heard these other things. So I think.
And he was willing, he was willing to, of course, he kept a lot of important information. But listen, a lot of like I represented during that time period 4 women accusing Donald Trump of sexual assault. And they said to me, if he would just apologize, we could be done, instead of him coming out and attacking me. My clients have often impressed upon me how important an apology was to them. And they couldn't get it. And I thought, this might be a great opportunity. Anyway.
Yes. So let's
I was wrong.
Hey, you know what? I appreciate that. Like, I don't want to go too far into that. I just want to highlight that what I saw through reading about your history and everything. That's sort of like how I saw that you practice and treat people. I thought maybe that was sort of relevant and one sort of linked to the other. But So like all right, let's move on. So like, what is your advice for someone who wants to start their own law firm?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I especially talk to women law school graduates, and they're like, do you have a job? Do you know anybody's a job?
Right.
And I'm like, why don't you just start your own law firm? Oh, how could I ever do that? And so it's easier than ever. Do you have a laptop? Do you have a brain? Are you able to Google things? I mean, it's really not that hard. You just have to get some clients. That's the hardest part.
Right.
So you set up your business, you do all the paperwork with the state bar and the Secretary of State, and you get insurance. And I don't think I have to bore people with that. There's websites that tell you how to do that. You do have to get clients, okay? And how do you get clients? You let the world know of the kind of work that you want to do and that you have a passion for it. I have a passion for representing victims of discrimination, harassment, and abuse. After the Weinstein thing, we went from 95% victim side to 100% victim side, which is where we've been for the last 4 years. That's all we do. That's the only kind of people we represent: race discrimination, sex discrimination, LGBT, age discrimination, you name it. And I'm out there on social media. I speak at conferences. Anywhere I go, I have my business card. I hand it out and I talk about what I do. And that's what folks can do. Think about everybody you know, whether it's your parents, your family, your friends, some kind of affinity group for your ethnicity, or I have an attorney in my firm who's Persian, and she does these Persian events. I'm like, hand out your cards, whatever it is. And you'll start getting cases. At the beginning, it may not be exactly the kind of cases you want. That's okay. I did a lot of family law for a while. I ultimately decided I really, really don't like family law. Yeah. And with pandemic, no more family law. Right. But I did it for a while because a lot of people have family law problems and they needed help, and it kept the lights on. So people can do it. There's tons of information out there on how to do it. It's very gratifying being your own boss.
Yes. Totally. That's great advice. Thank you so much. So, Lisa, you say that respecting and empowering clients is of the highest importance.
Yeah.
So like, what does that mean to you, and how do you do that for your clients?
So I'll give you an example. We represented 8 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and all of them were and still are terrified, even though he's dead. They're terrified because of all the high profile people he was connected with. They're terrified because they were assaulted at a young age. They were tricked. They were sexually assaulted. And I feel that in representing folks like these women, and we represent many women like this, the very least we can do is empower them to make their own choices. I'm never going to tell them what to do. I'm not going to talk down to them. My job, and my attorneys in my firm, our job is to explain to them the pros and cons of different approaches, and then they get to make the decision. Are we going to settle the case? Do we want to ask for X dollars? Do we want to ask for Y dollars? Do you want to go to trial? Do you want to do a media interview? It's always going to be their choice. And, it's very interesting. A lot of women, especially, really haven't been given the opportunity to make important choices about their lives in many cases.
Interesting. Yeah.
So we also kind of educate them about how to do it. I always tell them to sleep on it if it's a big decision. Let's think about the pros and cons, think about their life and what lies ahead. And, we have these very deep conversations about how to make difficult choices. And at the end of the day, I often see my clients kind of stand up and become very empowered and very strong.
Well, I think that's awesome. You have deep conversations about how to make these. So you're like personally connecting with these victims, and that was actually like my next question about like, what is it like to represent a Jeffrey Epstein victim? So I like that. Like, tell us again, like you personally connect and you have these deep conversations about how to go forward with the case.
And we take our time. So I have 10 lawyers who work for me in my firm, and another half dozen staffers, and we all do it the same way, which is we will either meet in person or over Zoom now, and we'll just really lay out the pros and cons, and we will listen to them. Many people come to me because they don't like their other lawyer, the first lawyer they had, and what do they say? It's usually he doesn't listen to me. He just talks over me.
Right.
Lawyers need to understand active listening. We need to stop talking. We need to ask questions, and then we need to hear what people are saying. Repeat it back. What I hear you saying is da, da, da. This is what's important. Do I have that right? Show a little humility and show some active listening skills. It goes a long way.
For sure. I get that. So Shifting gears, so you have a daughter who's in law school, correct? And
No, she's an attorney.
she's an attorney now. Okay, I must
She's
have
like
read
a
it.
6th-year attorney.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez, I'm sorry, I'm like behind the
No,
ball.
that's okay. You know, they just get
Congratulations to
older.
her.
They just get older. Who can keep up?
I know. I have one that's like a week old now. So like, what can I say?
You have a week-old baby?
Yeah, I'll talk about you after.
Oh my God,
go offline.
congratulations.
Thank you so much. So I was gonna ask about her law school research for like revenge porn, because I haven't heard about that, but that seems to be like 8 years in the past. So
Well, but I would like to say, yes, my daughter, Sarah Bloom, wrote a law school note about revenge porn, and I got to use it in one of my cases because we do some revenge porn cases.
okay.
So that was very exciting. You know,
Oh, that's cool. So you cited her in your case?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes.
All right. That's
Yes.
really awesome. Yeah.
I was very proud of that.
I'd love to connect with her too for lawyer stories, maybe feature her or whatnot.
Okay. She's working in-house at a tech company now.
Cool.
But I'd be happy to connect you.
Yeah, why not? So like you have a couple current cases that I thought were like pretty interesting, pretty noble, that you took. Not even noble, but I think they're significant, and I wanted to just bring them up. So like there's a current case with a student who was like slammed to the ground at high school. Is that ongoing right now?
Yes, that's ongoing. So Michaela Robinson, 16 years old,
Yep.
walking down the hall in her high school just a couple weeks ago, and the school security officer, a sheriff's deputy, slams her to the ground, body slams her, straddles her, is trying to grab her phone away. You know, what was her crime? Her crime was walking away from him when he was talking to her, which is actually what we want kids to do to de-escalate conflict situations. So the history in Lancaster is a lot of history of racial profiling and police violence. She's African-American. And, this just has to stop. This is just unacceptable. So we decided to take her case and to fight for her, and more broadly join this coalition, which is called Cancel the Contract, where we want to get police out of the schools. You know, when I went to school in a white suburban neighborhood, there was no police in the school. If somebody mouthed off or walked away when somebody's talking, you might get called into the principal's office. You might get counseled or detention or something. And that's what it should be. We shouldn't be feeding the school to prison pipeline.
So you think it's more, the benefit does not outweigh like the heart, like, because, you have police in schools for all those things, those nasty, nasty is like an understatement, but the shootings and all those things. But you think there shouldn't be police in school?
Yeah, I don't think I don't know if there's been shootings at the school. There's none that I'm aware of. But what happens instead is that Black kids are disproportionately targeted.
Okay.
And things that we would just consider normal teenage misconduct becomes criminalized. She ended up getting taken to juvenile hall and arrested. And the whole thing is ridiculous. Now she's got a record. Other kids, same kind of thing. Now you graduate with a record for just normal teenage behavior. And that feeds the school to prison pipeline. That's why we have disproportionate numbers of African-Americans and mass incarceration in America. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Suspicion Nation about the Trayvon Martin case, which I followed for NBC News, and the racism in the case. So it's still a huge problem, and we got to do something about it. So that's why we decided to take this case.
Yeah. Okay. Totally. Speaking of Trayvon, we actually had Ben Crump on the show like a few weeks ago. So that's going to come out in a couple weeks. Great. Really fun, really cool talking to him. Really nice guy, really great advocate. So like, tell us about your suit against Paul Marciano and Guess. I don't think I'm wearing Guess jeans right now, but that's kind of interesting too.
So yes, thank you. So in 2018, I represented 4 women who had allegations that Paul Marciano sexually harassed or sexually assaulted them. Actually groped them or sexually assaulted them. And a 5th woman came forward as well. There was an investigation. I use air quotes because I thought it was biased at the time. I still think it's biased. Like, one of the law firms represents them as a defense firm in these same cases. So it's kind of silly. Anyway, the investigation concluded with he found himself in situations where plausible allegations could and did arise. Such lawyerly euphemism kind of language, right? I'm paraphrasing, but I think I got it pretty close. Okay. So he ends up being removed from his position. We thought, hooray, this is great progress. And then in 2019, they bring him back. He's the only guy in the Me Too era that's had multiple allegations that has been removed and then brought back, as far as I know. So I now represent 3 more women who have had the courage to actually file cases for sexual assault, sexual harassment, and retaliation. Retaliation being once they complained, of course, they were iced out of any more work at Guess. And these are models, some of them who had modeled quite a bit for Guess. So it's really disturbing. This is a case that I just feel so strongly about. I don't understand why this company continues to stand behind him.
Right.
Do they really think that all of these women are liars? So that's 8 women. Kate Upton, a very prominent model, has spoken out about him groping her. That's 9. There was a case filed in, I think, 2009. That's 10. And I think there's probably others that we're going to get in discovery. I mean, how many women have to make allegations before they're believed?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a lot of allegations. So let me ask you a question. So do these mostly go to court, or do a lot of your cases go to court, or are they settled? Like, does somebody does he, like Paul Marciano, will he say, okay, look, I'm going to give each woman like X amount of millions of dollars and then that's it? Or are you going to take them to court? Like, how does that work?
So as you know, about 95% of civil cases in general settle before trial. And I think our cases are no different. Many cases that we bring settle. Many times we just write a letter. We have confidential negotiations. We have a settlement. Our clients prefer that. They don't want their name to be out there. It's very sensitive cases. We do what our client wants. If our client wants confidential settlement negotiations, that's what we do. And I would say the vast majority of our clients, that's what they want. In these cases, we filed them and we intend to go all the way to trial. Now, Guess has forced 2 of these 3 into arbitration because they signed modeling contracts that have language about arbitration, which of course they had no idea what that meant at the time that they signed it. So they're forced into arbitration, which means not open court. And we think that's unfortunate. Some companies have abandoned forced arbitration of sexual harassment cases. Guess, which is a company that claims to be about empowering women, they have not abandoned it. They still force sexual harassment plaintiffs into arbitration. So that's where we are in 2 of the cases. 3rd case we just filed in court. She does not have a modeling contract, so we don't think that one can be forced into arbitration. And we plan to go all the way to trial. I had 2 trials in 2019 for sexual harassment. One of them, we won an $11 million verdict, plus another $1.5 million in attorney's fees. It was one of the biggest jury verdicts in California of the year. We were very proud. We fought that case for years. So we assume once we're in a case to fight it all the way to the end.
That's amazing.
You know, I had a reporter ask me today in one of my cases, do you think it's going to settle? Are you planning, are you thinking it's going to settle? I'm like, I can't think it's going to settle. I can't, I can only think one direction at a time.
Right.
So I like to, I think we're going to try this case. What do I have to do to win this case? What are the witnesses? What are the evidence? How do I prove my case? I have to be in trial mode all the time. And then if out of left field, it ends up settling, okay, that does happen, but I'm not planning for that. I'm planning to go to trial and to give 100% for my client to win at trial.
Right on. Okay. So if somebody said to you, you do amazing work, I'm a student, how do I get into civil rights or representing people who are underdogs? Like, what would your advice be? Because I think that's kind of difficult to get into unless you open your own firm. So what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few jobs. There's not very many. A lot of people do reach out to me for jobs, and sometimes we're hiring, sometimes we're not. There was somebody who reached out to me very aggressively for a summer position. I probably shouldn't say this because other people are now going to do this, but we don't really do summer positions. But this woman, I liked her style, and I liked that she was aggressive, and so we gave her a summer job. Right? You got to go for it. Nothing's going to fall into your lap. Nothing has ever fallen into my lap. You got to go for it. And I've been rejected 100 times for every one good thing that I've achieved. Okay. Right. And you forget about the 100 rejections. They don't matter. I ended up getting some good things in my life, and that's what I focus on. Right. So you got to go for it. You got to get out there. And I think you can start your own firm, frankly, right out of law school. My mom did that back in the 1970s. God bless her. She looked around. She looked at her 2 smartest law school classmates, Michael and Nathan, and she's like, you guys, the 3 of us, we're going to start a law firm. And they said, are you crazy? Da, da, da. And she's like, you know what? If you start, they said, we should work somewhere else for a few years. She said, no, because if you do that, you're going to get married, you're going to have a mortgage, you're going to have kids, and then you're not going to be able to take the risk. So better to do it now. And she convinced them, and they've been together for like 45 years now.
That's awesome. Wow. So they're still together. That's incredible.
Yes.
Long-standing relationship. All
Yes.
right.
Right. Yes.
That's amazing. So Lisa, I mean, I appreciate all this info. Like, you really great guest. Like, I appreciate it.
Oh,
Like, is there anything you want to say to the Lawyer Stories community here?
Yeah, I would say, you got to roll with things. I think being a lawyer is a very stressful job, and you have to have stress reduction, like, techniques. I've gone through some very hard things, and I wanted to throw in the towel many times. I'm lucky to have a very supportive husband who never let me do that. I'm lucky to have an amazing team of lawyers and staff. I get all the credit, when things go well, but really they're the ones that do the vast majority of the work. And I'm very honored that they choose to have their careers be with my law firm, the Bloom Firm. And, my clients are amazing people who are very brave. So if you can find that kind of combination of work that really inspires you on behalf of people that you really want to fight for, I think you've won, and I'm very grateful that I get to do this work every day.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. If you'll just stay right there, I want to talk to you for a minute, but I thank you so much for coming on the Lawyer Stories podcast. And everybody, wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.
Thanks, Benny.